So here's the thing with homemade meals. Eating them is great, but all the chopping and measuring and cleanup, not so much. With new one-pan assemble and bake meals from Blue Apron, you get all the flavor of homemade meals with a fraction of the work. Just assemble the pre-chopped ingredients, bake in the oven, and enjoy. Shop Assemble and Bake at BlueApron.com. Get 50% off your first 2 orders with code APRON50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit BlueApron.com/terms for more.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles Mackenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Ed, we're recording this on Saturday night, a mere, 7 hours after United lost 2-1 at home to the Swans, and we were hoofing long balls up to Fellaini. Good times are back!
Oh yeah, Van Gaal's philosophy, right? He talks about that one. It was that could have been a David Moyes game at any point last season. I mean, not only were United just kind of clueless in attack and misshapen at the back, but as you say, started lumping it forward towards the end. I mean, the only real difference was 45 minutes of 3 at the back.
Yes, as will surprise few people, I guess, I had a slightly more optimistic take on parts of the game where actually we did string 3 passes together. I thought really that Van Gaal mentioned this, but the thing that struck me most is how nervous everybody looked. And I think that it's a sort of post-traumatic thing, right? It's they're back at Old Trafford. They played with this freedom and vivacity in pre-season. And I don't think it was really about the fact that it was pre-season and the opposition weren't trying as hard, because I don't think today had a great deal to do with Swansea, to be honest. It just looked like United froze up again. And one of the reasons that I'm really optimistic about it is I just don't think Van Gaal will let that continue.
Well, you'd hope not. I mean, that's the job, right? So, I mean, he's a man that has more gravitas and more nous and knowledge and respect to the players and so on than Moyes. So you wouldn't expect this pattern to continue. Look, he has to do some work. Clearly, there were things he tried to change during the game which didn't quite work for United. He switched from 3 to 4 at the back. At half-time, he said it's because Swansea spread the game and it was easier to press, so he wanted to get the ball back earlier by switching to 4 at the back. Fair enough, totally fair comment. Also, easier to defend when Swansea played very wide. Of course, they attacked, as you would expect, United's weak point straight away, which is the channel. So the uncertainty between the wing-back on either side, the wider of the 3 centre-backs when that happened, and I have to say I suspected that would be a weakness of United straight away, and of course the way that United would counter that is to retain possession of the ball, because when you have possession of the ball it's harder for the opposition to attack you, which United did. 60% possession, in fact, but very, very few clear chances.
Yeah, and I don't know, I heard a lot of people say they thought the second half was a bit of an improvement, and I guess they mean the first 20 minutes of the second half, because the last 20 minutes of the second half after Swansea scored their second were just a disgrace. And I think, we had a row on Twitter about Ashley Young and his culpability in the second goal, but I think once he was just an out-and-out left-back and United's back four was Young, Blackett, Smalling and Jones, that is a lot of players playing out of position and someone in their debut, isn't it? It's going to be vulnerable.
It is. I think where I actually disagree with you here is that it's a more difficult defensive job to play in a back 3/5 than a back 4. And so I understand what you were saying on Twitter, which is effectively if he was not playing at left back, he'd have had an extra central defender in there covering. But tactically, it's a more difficult position to play because of the space in the channel, and it's the weak point. So you switch the ball from left to right or right to left, or you play through that corridor of uncertainty, to steal a phrase from cricket. And it's the weakness in the system, and you need centre backs who are very comfortable moving into wider positions, and you need wing backs who understand the dynamics of space and timing and defensive nous, right? So I think when people think defending, they think, as a few people said to me on Twitter, but he made a few good tackles, and it's really not about that. How many tackles did Rio Ferdinand ever make in a game? Very, very few, right? And this is my problem with Ashley Young, and it's kind of what I said last week on our preview show. I didn't think that when it actually came down to it that his defensive ability would be up to playing the position. We'll see if he does it again.
I just don't think he did very much wrong in the entire first half. That's the thing. I totally take on board what you're saying about the tactical weakness that there is in the 3-5-2, and I think that's, as you say, that's why Van Gaal switched it. I think actually it's one of the reasons Van Gaal switched it. I think the fact that he started playing Jesse Lingard, like we've talked about Young a lot, but he's definitely the least problematic wing back out of himself, Lingard and Januzaj, because as soon as Lingard, who really shouldn't be playing that position anyway, went off and Januzaj came on and he didn't switch the system straight away, the first goal comes because Januzaj's playing wing back, right? And that is not a criticism of Adnan Januzaj. It's like when people had a go at Chris Smalling last season for not being a good right back. Chris Smalling's a great centre back. It's just not, can't play right back. Januzaj is a stunning attacking player who could play in any of the attacking positions, but asking him to play wing back when he hasn't had his full pre-season is properly crazy.
Fine, yeah, that's a perfectly fair observation. I don't think there's anything wrong with criticising a player who's playing out of position. It is just an observation of their weaknesses in that role. So I think United have a serious problem there. When Shaw and Raphael are fit again, then at least there will be that kind of defensive now. So the challenge there, of course, is that the attacking side to the game won't be quite the same. Anyway, look, there are problems all over the pitch for United, and they were highlighted during that game. And as soon as competitive football came around, United's weaknesses were laid bare, weren't they, very quickly. And in fact, in a way, we'd seen quite a bit of this during pre-season, not all strung together at once, and the results masked some of the performances which weren't always great. The final pre-season game against Valencia, United struggled for long parts of that game, especially defensively. And just look at the Valencia goal and the mess that was there. And again, on Saturday against Swansea, very, very poor defensively. So I don't think a lot of this is a surprise, really. I guess there was some kind of narrative going on that suddenly that Louis van Gaal would fix it all for United, and not only did he not believe that he could fix it all straight away, and said it will take some time, and he's told the Glazers and Ed Woodward that. But that the weaknesses in the United squad are such that it's almost impossible for him to miracle work, right? He's, I think, as I said in my pre-season preview, he's short of the full set of tools here, and he's a great coach. He's a much smarter coach than Moyes. He's going to do better with the set of players, pound for pound. But there are major weaknesses.
So I thought that the Valencia pre-season sort of played slightly into this idea that I've got, that actually the players are struggling with being back at Old Trafford because it's the scene of the crime, right? That was where everything went its most wrong last season. I would go out on a limb and say that that's definitely a factor in those performances. And of course, the other thing we have to talk about is, one United squad is thin, and the problem, essentially, that performance would not have happened if 3 of the 8 or whatever it is players that are injured had been fit. And it also wouldn't have happened if Januzaj wasn't half fit and coming back from injury. That performance would have looked so different if Danny Welbeck had been playing instead of Chicharito, for example, because you've got this infinitely more fluid link-up play. You've got Rooney able to be free and playing as a proper striker. If Valencia had been at wing-back, that would have made an enormous difference. If Shaw had been playing on the left or whatever. And of course, if the back three had been the senior back three. Not that they're particularly old, but they are the senior men. Although, actually, I don't think Blackett did too much wrong. I think he's got a big future by the looks of it. He seems to be settled very well. And it's early days, of course, and he's not the finished article, but it wasn't that bad.
No, I mean, he got himself out of position quite a bit, right? And I think this is part of the maturity he needs to find. Also, for a man who's flexible and has played at left back, mostly left back, I have to say, at academy and reserve level, and then later in his development in the centre, he's never actually played the left side of the back three ever, I don't think, aside from during pre-season. So it's a role he's learning, and there are subtle differences. On the ball, he's lovely, isn't he? He's extremely composed. He doesn't panic at any point. He makes the right pass more often than not. He certainly showed Chris Smalling up, didn't he, in terms of his range of passing and composure. Defensively, I think it's the positional side of his game more than the kind of bit, the visible bit, the tackling and so on, although he did make one very reckless challenge for which he got booked. So, I mean, he's got time. He's only 20, right? It's his first team game for United, so there's clearly some development to go here. I think this is why Van Gaal's been saying quite a bit. Look, they can play at this level, talking about Keane and Blackett, but do we know whether they can play every week? Well, there's still question marks for me, although passing was absolutely beautiful.
And if we were having this conversation on this day in 1995, we'd be saying they don't look ready yet. We've just got rid of 3 of our best players and we've chucked all these kids in and got battered.
Absolutely, yeah.
Maybe this is me being really unfair to David Moyes, and maybe the season will pan out and show that I was really unfair to David Moyes, but I don't think so, because I'm just not worried. If my only expectation and hope for United would be that we would win the league this season, then I'd be really worried, because I don't think that is looking likely, although, I'm still not ruling it out as an option. But I think it's very clear that the squad still needs investment, and in a way this result, Van Gaal can, go and knock on Woodward's door first thing tomorrow and go, sorted it yet.
He said very clearly in his post-match press conference that United need players. I mean, as he said in his interviews on Friday, that United was short of top quality. So I think while on the one hand he said, I want to look at my players, and that's what he kind of has to say about his players, he's also subtle in a more subtle way than David Moyes did, saying that he's a few players short. Of course, he has a lot of bank of credit, Van Gaal, not only for positive performances in pre-season, but just the fact he's Van Gaal compared to David Moyes. So he can get away with things that David Moyes couldn't. I mean, the kind of risible contempt for David Moyes when he moaned about the squad, a squad that had just won the Premier League, compared to Van Gaal. And it's not just that expectations have been reset, which they certainly have been, but also that he's Van Gaal, so he can just be a little bit more honest.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a disappointing performance. There were a few good points. Rooney scored an overhead kick, albeit an easy overhead kick, if such a thing exists. That's always fun. And it's good to see that he is scoring, because I think that's going to be really important. And I loved, oh my goodness, the feel-good factor that went through my heart when Van Gaal's press conference, when he said, let it fly. So if you didn't see this, he was talking about Rooney not having a great game at Valencia, and he was almost teasing Rooney and saying after the game, as the captain says, is it too much for you, Wayne? Is it too much for you? Don't worry, let it fly. And it's like, that is what someone has needed to say to Wayne Rooney for such a long time, because he does carry this phenomenal pressure on his shoulders, and somebody telling him to just let himself play the natural game that comes naturally to him, I think is going to help him.
Actually, I have to say, I agree with that. Aside from the fact that someone really needs to auto-tune that and get it to the tune of a Disney song, then I don't think Rooney performs anywhere near his best under pressure. I mean, it's just a facet of him. He's either trying too hard or it just doesn't click for him. He's a player who plays on instinct, always has been, and that's how he needs to do it. And the more relaxed he is, I guess, the better his performances. So just think about the number of good performances he's put in against Liverpool and Everton, for example. Not very many over the years, I'd say. So, yeah, maybe he's taken the captaincy a little too seriously at the moment. It's his. He has to find his way in doing that. So, I have to say, I thought during the first half he was very poor. And part of that was to do with the role he was playing. He was dropping a bit deeper, trying to link him and Mata to bastardise a Van Persie quote, we're getting into each other's zones.
Very much
so. And they've got to work that one out. In the second half, Rooney up front on his own, gave him more space and Mata more space too, and it worked a lot better, didn't it? Suddenly Rooney was looking like he was creating chances. And I have to say, and I've said this quite a lot, I think it's the only position Rooney can play if he wants to be a really elite player now. That's 9 right up front, and be interesting when Van Persie comes into the side, because I presume that he'd like to play in that role too. So the dynamic between Van Persie, Mata and Rooney is a key one, and they're going to have to work that one out. But the system with 3 at the back will give them more space to play, and we'll see if they can do that. And of course we'll see if Van Gaal keeps with 3 at the back or not.
Yeah, absolutely, and I suspect that he will. That's my suspicion. I don't think this is going to be the whole thing thrown out of the water. He's got the youth team playing that system, and I don't think that's all gone just on the strength of one poor half. The other thing that was a bright spark was Ander Herrera, who he took off after 65 minutes, I presume because Herrera was getting such treatment from Swansea, and he was thinking, right, I need to put a stop to this now. But that was when United fell apart for me. The introduction of Fellaini, not that Fellaini did anything much wrong, but Herrera is just a cut above the rest of our midfield, and was lovely to see him at Old Trafford. And I think he's going to have a big season, and he's just crucial to. And if if we could sign somebody of equivalent quality to play alongside him, as we said on the season preview show, it's going to be a whole different ball game.
Yeah, I mean, he's lovely on the ball, and he gets about a bit. He's a little ratter in there, isn't he? As well as being nice on the ball. I can't help feeling when I see him that he's a player that's just searching for a position, and he feels like a nice creative player that's playing a little deep, and I wonder whether he'd look like a bit of a lightweight player if he was playing further forward. So, I'm not quite sure he's quite found his role here. One of the things I thought about Herrera when it was confirmed he was joining was that I wasn't entirely sure that he would shine all of the time, because I think he does a lot of good things very well and does very, very few spectacular things. And we'll see with him. I think he's an excellent addition to United's midfield. It didn't quite work for him all the time today. He's very nice on the ball. I think more will be brought out of him if United had a real box-to-box midfielder there, or a proper ratter in there, someone with just a bit more presence. And which is why, of course, they're chasing Arturo Vidal.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I don't entirely disagree, but I also think he really has enormous presence. Like, as you say, he's a real terrier. He doesn't stop. He's constantly in the face of the opposition when they've got the ball, and I don't know. I just think he's all round Well, listen, we'll have this conversation again in 3 months' time, I guess, when we'll have a better sense of how he's fitting into United, won't we? I thought Mata looked not fully on it in this game, but I do think a lot of that is, as you say, players getting in each other's zones, and I think that will come. And I said it earlier in the show, and I kind of make no apologies for repeating it, and some people get very upset when you say this because they don't rate Danny, but the system with Mata, Welbeck and one of Rooney and Van Persie makes so much more sense than any other combination of our forwards. Because of the tireless running, because he's completely prepared to sacrifice himself for the cause of the team, and because his kind of interplay skills are the best of any of our forwards in some ways when it comes to little flicks and 1-2s and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, I can't see that happening in the short term. We'll see, of course. I mean, Van Gaal, as he likes to tell everyone, has the balls to make the big decisions. So lovely tweet doing the rounds that Van Gaal would be heading into Ed Woodward's office, balls in one hand, phone in the other, saying, "Sign me some players." Which is a nice image.
It is indeed. Talking of which, it looks like Benatia is very seriously on the radar. This is a tweet from Jim White, who is the Sky Sports chap who does transfers. He covers transfer deadline day and has become a bit of a weird cult of personality figure just because he's the last guy on Sky Sports every time. But he doesn't tweet transfer rumours generally. If you go through his Twitter list, it's just things that are nearly done. And he said it's almost done. He's on the way. So I'm sort of taking that at face value, which might be a mistake, but that'd be very exciting.
Well, I've called him out on the show a few times, didn't I, last season? So he'd be my second choice behind Mats Hummels. He covers the ground very well. He's a solid defender type, you know. I wouldn't say he's the Moroccan Nemanja Vidic, but he's a very good all-round defender. Some concentrational problems, I'd say, are the only weak point. But he's a very, very fine defender. We'll see if it really happens. Of course, he was the other Jim White, him of various Manchester United books. I might believe it a little bit more.
It's just the fact that the Jim White that it was that tweeted it doesn't talk about transfer rumours generally. That's what made me pay some attention to it.
So other players, Phil Jones, I think deserves a mention.
Yeah, man.
Had a very good game. How many tackles did he make?
What a player! This is like the season of Jones. Touch wood, Phil Jones won't get injured this season, because if he doesn't, then he's just going to be massive for us. The problem is, you watch him charging around the pitch like a crazed oxen, and the chances of him getting through too many 90 minutes doing that are pretty limited, aren't they?
He's going to get injured, and that's why desperately need some defenders. I'd say 2, not just 1. If Van Gaal is going to play 3 at the back all season, United need 5 central defenders. Maybe Blackett is the other one. Maybe. I mean, it might be tough on him just to sit on the bench all year, though, so he might do better with the loan. But we'll see. Of course, there aren't that many days left in the transfer window for old Woody to pull out a couple of irons from the fire. So, and he's not been that successful so far. In fact, he's much more successful in the market when he simply gets out of the way and lets the agents and the checkbook do the talking. So, Jones had a decent game. I mean, it's what you want for him. I think this season will be good for him, because he's going to get to play central defence every single week, right? So, it's going to be the making of him, surely. And of them, I think he has the best chance of really making a top career for himself. Smalling, I have to say, I'm just increasingly disappointed with him. I mean, I do like him as a defender. I think he's a very, very good defender. He's a natural defender, isn't he? And in the centre, and just a horrendous right back. So we just forget all of that. And the problem is, in a team that's going to play possession football all year, he just can't pass the ball. It's criminal how often he gives the ball away.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a problem. He does sort of make up for it in other ways, and if his passing can be improved, I definitely haven't run out of hope for him at United yet by any means. And I haven't run out of hope for United in general, I have to say. It's a shame that we didn't win, because there was a nice feel-good factor buzzing about the place, and it's, of course, it's sad to see that the feel-bad factor is back. Lots of Moyes jokes doing the rounds this time round. A picture of Louis van Gaal taking off a Scooby-Doo style mask and revealing Moyes, and another meme of Moyes looking at a camera saying, "Not that flipping easy, is it?" There's lots of that sort of thing, but I just don't think this is that. I think this is a team coming to terms with itself, coming to terms with a new system and a new coach, and better lies ahead. And when we are closer to putting out our first team, we'll look very different. But we've said this all along, that the problem isn't the first team, the problem is lack of squad depth, and that was really exposed in this game. Will it, Ed, be exposed when we play Sunderland?
Well, we've not had the best timing at Sunderland over the last few seasons, not always anyway. So I remember a pretty dreadful penalty shootout and a Carling Cup loss and so on. So, there's lots of quotes doing the rounds from Rooney, for example, saying United have to bounce back from this and we absolutely have to get our stuff together and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah.
Hashtag 2013, 2014.
I know, quite. He did go on to say it's unacceptable, which is basically where he should have just stopped, I think. So, of course, United have to perform better. I mean, it will help if there are some more players back. I guess Van Persie will be another week towards fitness. Marouane Fellaini another week towards the exit door. Maybe United will have done some deals by then. I can't say I'll be holding my breath. I can't hold my breath for a week, but I could probably hold my breath for closer to a week than I could waiting for Woodward to do any deals. It doesn't feel like it's going to happen. Who else has got to come back into the team? Maybe Raphael comes back into the team. Luke Shaw's out for another month. Carrick, it looks like he's out for more than another month if you saw him hobbling around in a plastic cast today. Fletcher didn't have the best games at all. It doesn't half make me feel that maybe it's difficult for him to reach this level again. We'll see, because he had a very good pre-season. Mata's got to be on it. He's the main creative force. They've got to find the right role for Januzaj. Right wing back certainly isn't it. And what do you do with Young on the left or the right? Potent going forward, as we said during pre-season. I suspect a liability going backwards. So lots and lots of questions to answer inside a week.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not all going to be answered inside a week, are they? That's the thing. It's going to take a while, and it might be a rocky start. But, Van Gaal was on the verge of the sack 3 months into the first season at Bayern Munich and then won the league. So these are very early days. The chronic lack of success last season, I don't mean the lack of silverware, but I mean the kind of lack of decent performances, means that actually the threshold for tolerance for poor performances has been run down, right? There is no threshold for those performances left, because we've been burned so badly by watching United last season. And I'm not saying that in like a spoiled United fan who's just watched brilliant football all the time, but I just mean as a collective, this isn't this is like, there's a very deep collective sigh, isn't there? A kind of, oh right, okay, here we go again then about this Swansea game, and I'm just not sure it's accurate.
I don't think replicating the narrative from last season onto this game is quite right. For sure, things have changed significantly. New coach, some new players in the side, 2 debutants today, a new system, a new outlook, and United are trying to do different things which are far more positive than last season. So, of course, the memes and the tweets and the social media commentary will be negative after this. It's United. There's no club in the world that garners more interest. And that's why United get the big bucks from various weird sponsors all over the world, right? So the intensity of focus is greater at United, because this is effectively the world's biggest club. I don't, you measure that many ways, and it's a very glib statement, but tell any of the players in Louis van Gaal that they're wrong when they say that. So the focus is going to be very intense, and it means that Van Gaal doesn't have that long in order to get it all right. I don't mean that he's going to get the boot or anything if it's not right by Christmas, but the pressure will start to build, of course, if it doesn't go right quickly. But I see lots of things that are going in the right direction. One thing you can't fix, though, right? You can't miraculously make some average players better. And United has a lot of deadwood in the squad. Talking of deadwood, Nani came on today, up front.
Unbelievable.
On the left up front. Amazing. We heard last week that Van Gaal didn't want him at the club. We know Moyes basically didn't want him after the club gave him a 5-year contract. Fergie definitely didn't want him. How many managers want this player out? And why won't he go?
The thing about it was, the one thing I was sure about the selection for this game is that we wouldn't see Nani, and it did feel like a bit of a desperate roll of the dice. Because he's been in such poor form, the chance of bringing him on to change the game seemed a little bit of a long shot, and the only reason for doing it was to change the system, right?
Yeah, so they can move Ashley Young to left back, and Nani went into the left side, sort of tucked in, didn't he, and Rooney went up top. So Van Gaal called it 4-3-3. I'm surprised we saw him. I suppose with 14 days left in the transfer window, there's still a chance for him to go. It's amazing, really. We haven't sold Anderson, and we haven't sold Nani, and I think we've been talking about whether it's their last chance at United for about 5 years.
I mean, we definitely had a debate about whether it was worth keeping Anderson in our first season doing this podcast. I remember it clearly. There was a story since we last recorded from the Daily Mail saying that last weekend there had been meetings between 2 and 4 p.m, it was weirdly specific, and that I'm pretty sure it was Raphael and then a bunch of people you'd expect, Fellaini, Will Keane, maybe a bit more of a surprise, but not that much, Nani and Anderson were all going to be surplus to requirements. People were surprised about Raphael because, I mean, the season before last, Raphael was one of our best players, wasn't he? And he had an absolute mare last season and looked to have regressed in his sort of those kind of temperamental decision makings. But I, for one, would be sad to see him leave United because he's just so darn lovable.
Yeah, that and United have no other right backs at the club. Right, so just that minor little thing. I mean, I think we said last week that even if Van Gaal wants to go with 3 at the back, that he needs to be able to have a plan B. Right, so plan B on Saturday was actually Young at left back because we don't have any other left backs apart from Luke Shaw. So if we're going to get rid of our only right back, Plan B at right back will be Antonio Valencia, and we've seen the result of that plenty of times, haven't we? So if he wants to sell Rafael, whether this is true or not, then an adequate replacement has to come in first, I would say. The thing about that list is, well, one, Van Gaal has contradicted this story and said quite clearly, actually, that he hasn't told any players they can go. He's told them what role they'll have in the team or the squad, and it's up to them afterwards. So, maybe that's a nuanced turn of phrase if he says, you're not going to play every week or ever, son. They might decide to go.
Yeah, rumours that Anderson was offered to a bunch of clubs in Brazil. That's the only place there's any interest coming for Anderson, apparently, which is not such a surprise.
Well, it's not, because not only has he been poor at United for some time, his injury record is bad and he's on big wages, but he was poor at Fiorentina too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I still maintain hope that he has some kind of career, because I do think it's a shame what happened to Anderson. But anyway, he has been stealing a living at Manchester United for quite a long time, and he's earned an absolute fortune in that space of time. It's remarkable when you think of it.
There's probably some people out there that still think he'll come good.
Yeah, probably. Give him another chance. The one player, of course, not on that list was Tom Cleverley. I can only assume that's just about numbers. But Fellaini was, and he is sort of technically a centre midfielder. Technically. Sort of.
Sort of. A 6 or 8. Perhaps we shouldn't be talking about defenders and right-backs and central midfielders, and we should do it the Van Gaal way and just talk in numbers.
She's just 6 or an 8. There is 2 weeks left of the transfer window. We need to bring some players in. We could do with shipping some players out, although the wage books are thoroughly balanced, aren't they, with the wages that have gone off the books in the summer. But if we did get rid of, say, even like 3 out of those players, most of them are on really substantial wages. The amount of wiggle room in United's wage budget must be ridiculous at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, if all those players go, yes, it would be 14 players having left the club. And, yeah, massive load of wages, of course, already come off with Evra, Vidic and Ferdinand in particular having left, and Giggs to some extent as well. So lots and lots of wiggle room in the wages. Of course, United's wage bill went up by something like 19% year over year in the last quarter result. So it's going up at the same time. Presumably, there's still a massive transfer budget that Woodward was briefing the Fourth Estate and everyone who'd listen about, and we're still watching this space, aren't we, for United to go and use some of that wage budget? Surely
we're going to be bringing in players in the next 2 weeks. I mean, I remember thinking that this time last season, and of course we just brought in Fellaini, which doesn't really count. I mean, we mentioned Benatia early on the pod. Hopefully that comes to something. But if we go into the next part of this season without another midfielder, it's going to be more by luck than judgment if we're still at the races by Christmas, isn't it? I mean, the only thing I can think is that he's waiting for Strootman in January, but I just can't see how that works.
We don't know that Strootman's going to come back to full fitness either. A very serious knee injury, so I'm not sure that sounds like a good strategy to me. I think United are negotiating hard for Vidal. Note that he's 1 to 10 on to be a United player by the end of the summer, so certainly people in the bookmaking community think that it's going to happen. All about the money in the end, isn't it? So United can make this one happen if they want to, I believe. The solid word is that Vidal said he'd like to, or told the Juventus hierarchy that he'd like to join United some time ago, and the rest is all down to the cash.
So, apart from his knees, there's no other reason we wouldn't want him, right? I mean, if his knees are up to top level, he's not Ronaldo, he's not even maybe Bale in terms of his numerical output, but in terms of being the player that United need more than any other, how is any amount of money in the world not the right amount to pay for Vidal?
Look, he's 3 players in one. He's going to get you 10 goals a season. He makes a tackle, he gets box to box, he creates goals too. His energy and presence. So right now, perfect type of player for United, and if not the best of that type, all-rounder, then very close to it in the world right now. So United would be paying a big premium. So he's a large club, he's a long contract, they're in the Champions League. He's 27 years old, so he's at his peak. So this is not one for the future, this is one for right now. And he has to succeed, and it's going to be a fee that's commensurate with that, which is plus 40 million or something like that. And I guess the worry is that Woodward and the Glazers are glazering it up and trying to get the lad on the cheap.
Which seems absolutely crazy, given that really has not been their transfer strategy, has it? I mean, we had a very polite and nice email from a listener who, I'm sorry, I can't get access to it just at the moment. I think it was Michael, but thank you for the email. And he was disagreeing with some of our analysis of Woodward, but your reply to him, Ed, I thought was really spot on, especially about the Luke Shaw transfer, where you said, like, with Herrera, he paid the buyout clause. With Mata, Woodward wasn't even involved in the transfer, and you could say it was sensible to delegate, but still, that's the minimum praise, isn't it? And then with Shaw, the strategy was just pay more than anyone's prepared to pay, right?
Well, when Jose Mourinho is complaining that Chelsea couldn't afford him, right? I mean, look, I don't want to denigrate Woodward too much because it's become a little bit of a cliche, hasn't it? And one man does not make a transfer. It's the Glazers that set the budget, and it's Woodward who's the principal negotiator. There are other executives involved, and a whole scouting system, an approach to identifying the players, right? So it's a team game, but he's the principal man, and this is where the focus is. But he couldn't lose out. For sure, they paid a huge amount of money. So, it's not the same criticism as in the past where United are not prepared to pay money. I just wonder whether they're really prepared to go to that big premium, right? 27 million is a lot of money, a very large amount of money for a 19-year-old kid who's unproven at the very highest level. It was a lot of money for a 25-year-old midfielder who's unproven at the highest level in Fellaini, and a 24-year-old midfielder unproven at the highest level in Herrera. So United have spent a lot of money in the last 6 months or so, or 12 months if you include Mata in this as well. So they seem to be prepared to pay the money, but if you're going for that mega premium player, it's going to command a mega premium fee. I mean, James Rodriguez went for 63 million this summer. Vidal's not far off that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really hope that the United hierarchy realises that that's their only option. And you would think that with the reduction in debt burden, the fact that the Glazers have just sold a bunch of shares, literally just for the sake of their own personal liquidity. None of that money's coming back into the club. They just made, I think, $180 million for the Glazer family. You would think that they're making enough money out of the club that they would realise that massive, substantial investment is the only way to go right now. And this is not us being City. I was delighted to see Blackett in the side, and I think it'd be brilliant if he comes through this season. A couple of others too. And Januzaj's looking like he's going to be a huge star that we've sort of, not exactly brought through, but at least brought through the last stage of his youth development. So it's not like we just want to go out and buy big signings. But as you've said time and time again, the United way is develop our own and supplement where we're weak with massive investment.
You have to, right? At the risk of sounding like a broken record, plenty of analysis out there that ties money on transfers and money on wages to success, right? Very, very tightly. And in the 80 to 90% range. So, frankly, if United want to be competing at the very highest level, they're going to have to compete for transfers, fees and wages with all the other clubs around Europe. It is a typical City fan retort now, isn't it, that if United spend big money, that, it's only City that buy success. I guess the difference, not to get into that argument, but it is that this is United's generated money from Ed Woodward's commercial activity, where United are prepared to stick anybody's logo and their face on any packet of any noodle or tomato juice or paint or whatever the hell anywhere in the world in order to get this money. And I'd hope that is not just to inflate the share price and allow the Glazers to get rich, but also to make sure United are competitive. And the final thing, of course, is that if United drop out of the Champions League, then they lose 30% of the commercial deal from Adidas, apparently. And in fact, this is what Perez from Real Madrid said was very common in contracts, and that he thought it would cost United a lot of money. It hasn't leaked out that a lot of United's contracts were structured that way, probably because no one thought United would ever drop out of the Champions League.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing. You wonder whether that clause wasn't there just because no one even thought it was possible, although they clearly thought it was possible when they hired David Moyes and put that clause in his contract, didn't they? I bet Moyes loved that game, though. How much would he have been loving that? I think he did punditry for it on some TV channel somewhere. He'd have just been in heaven.
Well, we'll find out, because a major interview in the Daily Mail on Sunday. So I wonder. He's already been saying a few things along the lines of Van Gaal will need time. So I suspect his major interview in the Daily Mail will say, they didn't give me enough time. I didn't have enough time to succeed at the club, which of course is the thing many people said. Unfortunately, it became very apparent by the time David Moyes was finally fired last April that he'd had too much time.
Yes, quite. So, we play Sunderland next weekend, and I have no idea how to predict it. I guess my first thing that I'd like to know what your instinct was is he going to start with a 3-4-1-2 at the beginning of that game?
Well, I think so, because that's the formation he's decided, and his explanation of the change was a tactical one, not a strategic one, so I'd expect so. Sunderland are going to play a 4-3-3. That's pretty much how they play at the moment. They're in an interesting period, Sunderland, aren't they? Because they didn't really invest heavily in the transfer market this summer, or they spent a lot of money on Jack Rodwell, of course, more than £10 million, and it feels like a lot of money for someone who's barely kicked a ball in 2 years. But elsewhere, they've not strengthened a lot. They brought Jordi Gomez in from Wigan. I think he was a freebie. Van Aanholt, the Dutch left-back, who's barely ever played a game for Chelsea, been on loan everywhere for years. Will Buckley, who I quite like actually, from Brighton. Don't know whether he seems sort of bright attacking player, but I don't think he's going to suddenly transform into a world star at Sunderland in the Premier League. He's a good attacking player, but he's a squad player there. So I don't think they're substantially better than they were last season, which means they're going to be in the hunt for a relegation place come the end of the season, probably. Yeah,
you'd imagine, wouldn't you? Because you'd think like Poyer's going to go crazy at some point. Something will happen. They've got the greatest consummate professionals of all time in Wesley Brown and John O'Shea, of course, still. You would think that they're going to be relegation fodder. What I don't know is whether they're going to be beating United at the weekend fodder. It's amazing. Like, instant evaporation of confidence and feel-good factor. What was it Van Gaal said? The confidence would be smashed after smashed confidence. And my confidence is smashed in the short term. I would love it if United's players found some mental resilience, and if Louis van Gaal can somehow put some of that resilience back into United that had so completely evaporated last season. And I think this would be a really good sign, wouldn't it?
Of course, yeah. And it is vitally important that he keeps them on an even keel. So maybe we'll find out. We'll have this away from Old Trafford vibe that you say is going on, and see whether it's a better result or not this time. I mean, United desperately need the result. Not only that, they desperately need the points. I mean, it was supposed to be an easy start to the season. United don't actually play anyone of any real note until October the 4th when United visit Everton, right? And in between that, there's 3 games against the newly promoted sides and 3 games against teams that were fighting off relegation last season, and the Carling Cup game against MK Dons.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be good, and it's got to be good quickly, hasn't it? That's the thing. Because if we fall into a real lapse, it's gonna be hard to get out of. Although this is exactly the pattern of his first season at Bayern, isn't it? And I just think, because of writing for the Bleach Report, I quite often have to write these 6 things we learned thing that's taken over the world of how you write about football matches for some reason. But I really don't think we learned very much from that game. Everything that happened in that Swansea game, we kind of already knew might be the thing that happened. And we all hoped that it wouldn't, right?
Well, yeah. A lot of what happened was obvious. A lot of what happened was a bit of a shame, because we thought United might have progressed a little bit more than has actually happened over the summer. So did we learn much? Well, we learned that Tyler Blackett is a composed defender and can certainly play at this level. We learned that Ander Herrera is an asset to United, albeit with some caveats. I think we learned that if Fellaini gets on the pitch, United launch it.
That was
we knew that one already, though,
definitely not new information. They just see him. It's the Peter Crouch effect. They see him in the distance and they think, oh, this gets exciting. We'll just whack it along to him and he'll do something.
Sadly, yeah, that appears to be the case. The sooner he leaves, the better, although who wants to take on his £100,000 a week wages?
So I guess we should probably talk about doing some sort of predictions for Sunderland. But before we do that, let's get a couple of Rantcast questions. I specifically asked for non-grumpy questions because I figured that all the grumpy stuff between us we would cover. So this is pretty grumpy. From @pizza_face with a 1 in the eye for pizza says, what percentage of blame for lack of signings do we apportion to the Glazers, Woodward and Van Gaal himself?
I think about 50-50 Glazers and Woodward, don't you think? I don't actually believe the statements that he says he wants to check out his full squad and give everyone a chance before he identifies who he wants to sign. I think he knows exactly where he needs to strengthen the squad already, so I think you can see through that one. It's a bit naive if you actually believe that's the case. Quite a few people have been telling me that on Twitter. I don't think so. He knows exactly where he wants to strengthen, so the entire blame is with the executive.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Maybe he gets 1% of blame if he really did turn down the option to pick Tony Kroos up, but if he did, then he had his reasons, sort of thing.
I think Tony Kroos wanting to sign on the dotted line with Real Madrid was one of the reasons United were suddenly not very interested.
Virtual friend of the Rantcast @Jack K. Holt says, if you were sat right next to Louis van Gaal in the dugout, like if you were sat right behind the dugout, what would you say to or shout at Louis?
Shine some players. No, that went a bit Scottish for a second there.
Shine some players, Miss Moneypenny. I said Miss Moneypenny, so you knew I was doing James Bond. See, that's classic.
Brilliant.
I'd say, are you absolutely sure you want to bring Nanny on? Like, really, definitely? Are you sure? But then if he said he was sure, I would leave him to it because he knows what he's doing, doesn't he? And @Abin_Shetty says, considering his love for space, and in particular watching this space, is Ed Woowar a Star Wars guy or a Star Trek guy? Listen, I don't mean to cast aspersions to my Star Trek brethren, but I think he's a Star Trek guy because they are slightly more nerdy than Star Wars guys. He's got that look. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that's my own inherent prejudice, but I would guess he's more of a Trekker than a Star Wars fan.
I tell you what he is. He's a man who doesn't like a razor. For an executive, he's not very polished, is he? He's always got 3-day stubble. But the thing about it, he's not in some kind of suave, kind of Hollywood A-lister way. It's he's just been out on the bevies and he's had like 15 too many after a hard day on doing the banking stuff, which he likes doing.
Maybe that explains the whole thing. Edward Woodward's secret drinking problem. No, that was a joke. That was parody, protected under the laws of satire. I don't actually mean that he's got a drinking problem. So, I guess with that, let's do some predictions for the Sunderland game and call that a Rantcast, shall we?
57-0. No.
5-1, Ed. 5-1, you said.
Well, I had tongue-in-cheek, but from now on, I'm going to be serious. Look, United have to go and win. Maybe the pressure will be off a little bit away from Old Trafford, if that's the thing. So I think United will go and win, but there's clearly goals in the bag for Sunderland, aren't there? I mean, given how United defended at times today. So I'm going to say 2-1 to United. I'm torn between predicting a sort of narrow, scrappy win for United and actually a proper bounce back where they really show a bit of themselves. I think to err on the side of caution, I'm going to predict... let's say a 2-1 win. Yeah, I think that's as you said, Ed, we'll both go with 2-1. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? 2-1? That's rubbish. What are you talking about? That's a nonsense, man. It's clearly going to be 1-2.
Brilliant. So, if you want to get hold of me or Ed in between now and the next podcast, you can get me at UTD Rantcast and Ed at United Rant on Twitter. You can get us both at facebook.com/United Rant, and you can read a load of high quality analysis of Manchester United on unitedrant.co.uk, and you can read my stuff on the Bleacher Report. Much obliged if you do. And if you want to help out with bandwidth costs and all that sort of stuff, unitedrant.co.uk/donate. Thank you very much to everyone who's done that. Any little bit really helps. Basically, that means that we don't have to pay for the show, which is super cool. Thank you very much. And the last request is if you could leave us a review or rate us on iTunes. That helps us with the new season bump on the iTunes charts and all that sort of stuff.
Very good. And if you want to check out Paul doing his Mark Zuckerberg hoodie look, go look at the archives on CNN.com.
Yeah, I was on CNN during the recording of this Rantcast, so if there's a weird sound difference halfway through, that's because that's before I was an international superstar and after I was an international superstar.
It's gone to your head. How's your entourage these days?
Do you know what? I'm keeping it real. Listen, this is where the real stuff happens, the Rantcast. CNN, that's just, it's just for show, really, but this is the real stuff that matters.
Have you gained a Coke habit yet?
No. All my habits are long in the past.
Very good. Well, I'm afraid it's a habit for Manchester United to lose at Old Trafford, isn't it? Gary Lineker tweeted earlier that the running order for Match of the Day would have United versus Swansea on first. Don't they put either the big game or the surprise of the day? I'm afraid neither of those is true. In this case, no surprise with United losing at Old Trafford. It's happened, 6 or 7 times over the past 12 months. So, very, very bad run. Let's hope United stop that at Sunderland. And then Micey Dons after that, but we'll be back with a Rantcast before that. Of course, you will have noticed, you have, a bit more perception that we have moved days. Now on a Monday, going head-to-head with the Fiver, or whatever it's called over at The Guardian.
With Football Weekly, yeah. James Richardson, has he ever been on CNN? Yeah, probably, loads of times. Yeah, do you remember when he had his own TV show? Great days.
Yeah, but he's on the slide, you see, that's it. So he's gone over the edge.
He's back and in force now. He's back on BT Sport doing a top quality European sports show with all the...
Very good. He basically does his podcast on the telly.
Why can't we do that?
Well, apparently we are on our fixtures on CNN. Very good. Well, let's hope United sort this one out. And Ed, if you're listening, Ed, sign some players.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.